The betrayal hit me like an icy wave when Jake casually mentioned his sister had planned his surprise birthday party for Saturday, our moving day, the day we'd scheduled 3 months ago, the day that was supposed to be our fresh start. And just like that, Eliza had done it again, inserting herself between us and watching our plans crumble and be reborn as hers. "It's just one day, Mia," Jake said, his voice softening as he reached for my hand across our kitchen table, the one we were supposed to be packing. "We can move on Sunday instead." The kitchen smelled of cardboard and packing tape, that distinct, dusty scent that comes with boxing up memories. I could hear the neighbors' wind chimes tinkling through our open window, the sound suddenly irritating rather than soothing. "We've had this scheduled for months," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The movers are booked. The lease starts tomorrow. Your sister knew all of this." Jake ran his fingers through his hair. That nervous habit I once found endearing now made my stomach tighten with dread. "She worked really hard on this. All my friends are coming. My parents, too." His eyes pleaded with me. "It's my 30th, Mia. It's important." "And our move isn't?" The words tumbled out sharper than I intended. The cardboard box between us suddenly felt like a barrier, one of many Eliza had skillfully placed over the 2 years Jake and I had been together. This wasn't the first time Eliza had orchestrated a collision of plans. 6 months ago, she'd suddenly needed Jake's help painting her apartment the weekend we'd planned our first real vacation together. 4 months before that, she'd developed a mysterious illness requiring Jake's care during our anniversary weekend. Each time, Jake abandoned our plans without hesitation, rushing to fulfill his sister's needs while mine were postponed indefinitely. "Look," he said, his tone shifting to that placating voice that always surfaced when discussing his sister. "I know you two have had your differences, but she's family, and she's put a lot of effort into this party." The way he emphasized family made my chest ache. The unspoken implication hung in the air between us. I wasn't family. Not yet. Maybe not ever if Eliza had her way. I traced the edge of the packing tape with my fingernail, feeling the sticky residue catch against my skin. "Fine," I finally conceded, exhaustion flooding my body. "I'll call the movers." Relief washed over Jake's face as he bounded around the table to kiss me. "You're the best," he murmured against my hair. "I promise I'll make it up to you." We spent the rest of the afternoon finishing our packing in relative silence. The apartment echoed with the sounds of tape stretching across cardboard and Jake's occasional humming. He was already in celebration mode, while my mind raced with logistics and suppressed frustration. That night, while Jake showered, I called the moving company. The woman on the phone sighed when I explained our situation. "Saturday is our busiest day, especially at month's end," she explained. "We're fully booked." I clutched the phone tighter. "Is there any way to move us earlier? Maybe tomorrow?" "Let me check." The sound of keyboard clicking filled the pause. "We had a cancellation for tomorrow afternoon. We could fit you in, but it would be a rush job, and there'd be an additional fee." "I'll take it," I said without hesitation, relief flooding through me. "How much?" After settling the details and the considerably higher price, I hung up just as Jake emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my flushed face. "Just finalizing some work stuff before the weekend," I lied, the words bitter on my tongue. We'd never needed lies before Eliza became a constant wedge between us. The next evening, Jake's phone buzzed just as we finished dinner among our towers of boxes. He checked the message and immediately stood up. "Eliza needs help with some last-minute party stuff," he announced, already reaching for his keys. "She wants to make sure everything's perfect." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "We still have the kitchen to pack." Jake glanced around at the half-emptied cabinets and shrugged. I won't be long. You can handle this, right? You're better at organizing anyway. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed through our soon-to-be former apartment. I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, the sharp scent of cleaning products stinging my nostrils as I contemplated what to do next. 3 hours later, with the kitchen fully packed and my back aching from the effort, I received a text from Jake. "Staying at Eliza's tonight to finish up. See you tomorrow. Love you." I collapsed onto our bare mattress, the only piece of furniture not yet disassembled, and listened to the unfamiliar creaks of our emptying apartment. Tomorrow was supposed to be our moving day. Now it would be Jake's party, while I sat among boxes, waiting once again for Eliza's plans to run their course. Sleep evaded me as I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing across it like the doubts swirling in my mind. Something had to change. I just wasn't sure yet what that something would be. I awoke to the harsh glare of sunlight streaming through our curtainless windows and the buzz of my phone. Another text from Jake. "Helping E set up. Back by noon. Don't forget to wear that blue dress I like for the party." The timestamp read 8:17 a.m. I sat up, my neck stiff from a restless night, and felt the first spark of rebellion ignite in my chest. The movers would arrive at 1 o'clock. Jake wouldn't be back in time. I padded to the kitchen to make coffee, only to find we'd packed the coffee maker. The apartment felt eerily empty, with just the essentials left unpacked for one more night. A night that was supposed to be spent in our new place. As I rummaged through Jake's desk for the lease documents we'd need to present to the building manager, my hand brushed against a folder I didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued. I opened it to find printed emails between Jake and Eliza dating back several months. My fingers trembled as I scanned the correspondence, the bitter taste of betrayal flooding my mouth. "I'll make sure my surprise party conflicts with moving day," Eliza had written 3 months ago. "She'll have to reschedule, and maybe you'll finally see how inflexible she is about your needs." Jake's response made my stomach lurch. "Not sure that's necessary, but I know you're just looking out for me. Let's see how it plays out." He knew. He'd known all along that Eliza deliberately scheduled his party on our moving day, and he'd pretended to be surprised when she announced it. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. Worse still, as I continued reading, I discovered more recent messages where Jake mentioned he'd forgotten to tell his parents we were moving in together, and that they wouldn't understand our living situation. "Maybe it's better if Mia doesn't come to the party," Eliza had suggested just yesterday. "Mom and Dad still think you have your own place." "You're probably right," Jake had replied. "I'll figure out a way to tell her." The room spun around me as the full weight of the deception crashed down. 2 years together, and Jake was hiding our relationship from his parents while allowing his sister to actively sabotage us. The betrayal stung like salt in an open wound, the pain radiating through my chest until it transformed into something else entirely. Resolve. I straightened my spine, took a deep breath that smelled of cardboard and finality, and made a decision. I would move today as originally planned, without Jake. First, I called our new landlord directly, explaining that my partner had accidentally taken our lease documents. The sympathetic woman assured me she could print new copies if I came by before noon. Next, I methodically sorted through our packed boxes, separating mine from Jake's with quiet determination. The sound of packing tape ripping open and being resealed punctuated the silence of the apartment like decisive punctuation marks, ending one chapter of my life and beginning another. I worked with cold efficiency, the familiar weight of disappointment transforming into something lighter. Liberation. Each item I reclaimed felt like retrieving a piece of myself that had been sublimated in the name of keeping peace with Jake and his sister. By noon, I had neatly reorganized everything. Jake's possessions were thoughtfully packed and labeled, stacked in the living room with care. Mine were by the door, ready for the movers. The quiet distinction between what was his and what was mine suddenly seemed like the most important boundary I'd ever drawn. When my phone rang at 12:30, Jake's name flashing on the screen, I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to hear his reaction. "Hey, where are you?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "The movers will be here in half an hour." "About that," Jake began, his tone already defensive. "I think we should postpone until tomorrow. Today's just too hectic with the party and everything." In the background, I could hear Eliza's voice, though not her words. The familiar sound of her presence in our conversations made my jaw clench. "The movers are coming at 1, I stated simply. "I'm not rescheduling again." "What? Mia, I'm not even there. You can't start moving without me." His voice rose in pitch, indignation bleeding through. "Actually, I can," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "And I am. But my party is at 7. The move will be done by then." I paused, waiting for him to acknowledge the plan could work, that both his needs and mine could be met. Instead, after a muffled conversation with someone else, he sighed dramatically. "Look, about the party. Eliza thinks it might be better if you don't come." The words should have hurt. Just yesterday, they would have devastated me. Today, they merely confirmed what I already knew. "Why is that?" I asked, curious to hear which excuse he'd choose. "It's just, my parents will be there, and they don't exactly know we're living together. It might be awkward." The doorbell rang. The movers, 15 minutes early. Perfect timing. "I understand completely," I said, and meant it. I finally understood everything. "I have to go. The movers are here." "Wait." I ended the call and opened the door to my future. The movers worked efficiently, loading my carefully separated possessions into their truck. I supervised with a strange sense of detachment, as if watching someone else's life being packed away. The apartment, half emptied now, echoed with the heavy footsteps of strangers carrying out the physical manifestations of my decision. My phone vibrated incessantly. Jake had called 7 times and sent 13 text messages in the span of an hour. I finally answered when the movers were taking a quick break. "What the hell, Mia?" Jake's voice crackled with anger. "You're actually moving without me?" "Yes," I replied simply, watching the movers lift my bookshelf. "You chose to be at Eliza's today. I'm respecting your choice while making my own." "This isn't how we planned it," he shouted, his voice so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The familiar scent of dust and sweat filled my nostrils as I moved closer to the window, seeking fresh air. "Plans change," I said, echoing his casual dismissal from yesterday. "You taught me that." In the background, I heard Eliza's voice, clearer this time. "Is she being dramatic again? Just tell her to grow up and stop making everything about her." I waited for Jake to defend me, to acknowledge the unfairness of her comment. Instead, I heard him exhale sharply. "Eliza says—" "I heard what Eliza said," I interrupted, my voice finally betraying a hint of the emotion churning beneath my composed exterior. "And I heard what you didn't say." A tense silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of the movers returning to work, their boots heavy on the hardwood floors. "Look," Jake finally said, his tone softening into the placating voice I'd grown to resent. "You're overreacting. Just wait until tomorrow and we can move together like we planned." "Like we planned 3 months ago before Eliza deliberately scheduled your party on our moving day?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "What are you talking about?" His voice sharpened with what sounded like panic. "I found the emails, Jake. I know she did it on purpose, and I know you knew." Another silence, heavier this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, hardened with defensive anger. "You went through my emails? That's a violation of—" "Don't!" I cut him off. "Don't you dare try to make this about me looking at the emails rather than what's in them." I heard muffled conversation. Then Eliza's voice grew louder, as if she'd taken the phone. "Listen here, Mia. Jake doesn't need this stress on his birthday. If you cared about him at all—" I ended the call, my hand shaking slightly. The lead mover approached, clipboard in hand. "We're about done loading up? Ready to head to the new place?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. As I did a final walkthrough of the apartment, my phone pinged with a banking alert. I opened it to find a notification of recent charges on my credit card. $487 at a party supply store and $215 at a liquor store, both made yesterday. The trembling in my hands stopped as a cold clarity washed over me. Jake had used my credit card to fund his party, the party I wasn't welcome to attend. I immediately called my bank, reporting the fraudulent charges and requesting a new card. The customer service representative's voice was sympathetic as she processed the dispute and canceled my card. "We can expedite a new card to you," she offered. "Would your current address work, or do you need it sent somewhere else?" For the first time that day, I smiled. "A new address, please." By the time the movers and I arrived at the new apartment building, I felt lighter than I had in months. The property manager greeted me warmly, the fresh lease documents ready for my signature. Just my signature. "Your partner won't be joining us today?" she asked, clearly remembering our original plan. "Change of plans," I replied, signing my name with a flourish. "It's just me now." As the movers began bringing in my belongings, I noticed a missed call from an unexpected number. My father. We spoke weekly, but he rarely called outside our Sunday schedule. I stepped onto the balcony of my new apartment to return his call, the cool breeze carrying the scent of newly cut grass from the park across the street. "Hey, Dad," I said when he answered. "Everything okay?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," he replied, concern evident in his voice. "Jake called the office looking for you. Seemed pretty frantic." My father's casual mention of Jake calling his office made me freeze. "Jake called you? At work?" "Said he couldn't reach you and it was an emergency." Dad's tone shifted from concern to suspicion. "Is everything all right, Mia?" I leaned against the balcony railing, processing this new development. Jake had called my father, the CEO of Westbrook Industries, where Jake had worked for the past 3 years. Jake, who supposedly didn't know I was related to his boss because I'd been working my way up from entry level without using my family connections. "Dad," I said slowly, "how did Jake know to call you?" A pause. "He didn't call me directly. He called the executive office asking for Richard Westbrook because, and I quote, his daughter isn't answering her phone." So, the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Jake knew. He'd known all along who my father was, despite my careful efforts to keep that information private while I proved myself at the company. "Mia, what's going on?" I took a deep breath and told my father everything. The moving day conflict, finding the emails, Jake using my credit card, being uninvited to the party, and now this revelation. Dad listened without interruption, a skill honed from years of business negotiations. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "The Anderson proposal presentation is on Monday," he said finally, referring to the project Jake had been leading. "I think it might be time for me to take a more active interest in that department." The calculated coolness in my father's voice made me shiver despite the warm afternoon sun. "Dad, you don't need to—" "I'm not doing anything yet," he assured me, But I don't appreciate anyone using my daughter to advance their career, especially someone who doesn't treat her with respect. After we hung up, I stood on the balcony watching the movers bring in the last of my boxes. My phone buzzed again. Jake, of course. This time I turned it off completely. The empty apartment stretched before me, a blank canvas awaiting my sole decisions. For the first time since the moving date had been set, I felt a genuine sense of excitement about the future. 3 years ago, fresh out of business school, I made a decision that shocked my family. I wanted to work my way up through my father's company without using the Westbrook name. I believed that true respect came from proving yourself, not from inheritance. Dad had reluctantly agreed, making arrangements with HR to hire Mia Davis, using my middle name as a last name, in an entry-level position. Only the most senior executives knew my true identity. I shared an apartment with a college friend, drove a modest car, and lived well below my means. A year into my experiment, I met Jake Porter when we were both assigned to the same project team. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas rather than just trying to impress the team leader. Our relationship evolved naturally, from colleagues to friends to something more. When he asked me to move in with him after a year of dating, it felt like the right step. I'd never told him about my family, not out of malice, but because once people knew I was Richard Westbrook's daughter, they never saw me for myself again. I'd planned to tell Jake when the time was right, perhaps after we'd moved into our new place and had a chance to settle in. Now, as I unpacked boxes in my new apartment, I wondered if Jake had known all along. Had our entire relationship been a calculated career move on his part? My phone, which I'd eventually turned back on, pinged with an email notification from my personal account. It was from my father, with a subject line that simply read, FYI. He had forwarded an email exchange from 6 months ago, accessed from the company server, from jporter@westbrook-in.com to elizaporter83@gmail.com. Subject, meeting the parents. Hold off on the dinner plans. Just found out something interesting about Mia that changes everything. Remember how I mentioned my boss, Richard Westbrook, has a daughter no one's ever seen? Turns out Mia is that daughter. She's using a different last name at work. This is huge. If I play this right, I could fast-track to upper management. The Anderson project is my chance to impress her father directly. Just need to keep things solid with Mia until then. Don't mention any of this if you see her. She thinks no one knows. Jake. The email thread continued with Eliza's enthusiastic response about how Jake could leverage the relationship, followed by several more exchanges discussing their strategy. The most recent was from just 2 weeks ago, where Jake mentioned using our move as an opportunity to cement things before the Anderson presentation. I sat heavily on my newly delivered couch, the leather cool against my skin, as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The relationship I'd thought was genuine had been, at least for Jake, a calculated career move. My hands trembled as I set down my phone, the faint smell of new paint and fresh carpet suddenly overwhelming. I moved to open a window, needing fresh air to clear my head. As I stared out at the city skyline, my initial shock gave way to a strange sense of calm. The betrayal hurt, yes, but it also freed me from the doubts that had plagued me for months. I hadn't been imagining the subtle shifts in Jake's behavior, the way he'd begun mentioning my father's company more frequently, asking casual questions about the executive structure. I picked up my phone again and called my father back. "I got your email," I said when he answered. "I thought you should know," he replied, his voice gentle. "There's more where that came from if you want to see it." "No," I decided. "That's enough." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Dad, remember that executive apartment in the Westbrook Tower you offered me when I graduated? The one you insisted you didn't want because it was too ostentatious?" I could hear the smile in his voice. Is it still available? It is, he confirmed. And the view is even better since they completed the park renovation. By evening, arrangements had been made. The moving company would return tomorrow to transfer my belongings to the luxury apartment in my family's building. My father's assistant had already coordinated with the building management to expedite the process. As I prepared to spend one night in the half-unpacked apartment, a final idea formed in my mind. A quiet power move that would make the situation unambiguously clear to Jake. I found the framed photo I'd kept hidden in my personal files. A picture of my father and me at last year's company gala before I'd met Jake. I'd attended as Richard Westbrook's daughter rather than as Mia Davis from accounting, wearing a designer gown instead of my usual work attire. No one from Jake's department had been invited to the exclusive event. I wrote a brief note on the back of the frame. Best wishes on your future endeavors. Mia Westbrook. Then I called a courier service and arranged for the package to be delivered to Eliza's address at exactly 7:30 p.m., when Jake's birthday party would be in full swing. The setting sun cast long shadows across my temporary living room as I finished the arrangements. Tomorrow, I would become Mia Westbrook again, no longer hiding who I was or diminishing myself to make others comfortable. The thought brought with it not just satisfaction, but a profound sense of returning to myself. The Westbrook Tower penthouse apartment wrapped around the entire top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. Standing in the spacious living room as the movers arranged my furniture, which now seemed almost comically modest in the expansive space, I felt simultaneously out of place and exactly where I belonged. My phone had been buzzing consistently since last night, first with confused messages from mutual friends at the party, describing Jake's face when he opened my delivery. Then increasingly frantic texts from Jake himself, evolving from confusion to realization to desperate pleas. What kind of sick joke is this? 8:03 p.m. Is this real? Are you actually Richard's daughter? 8:17 p.m. Please call me. We need to talk. 8:42 p.m. Mia, I can explain everything. 9:15 p.m. This doesn't change how I feel about you. 10:27 p.m. Please tell me where you are. 11:38 p.m. By morning, the messages had taken on a panicked tone. The Anderson presentation is tomorrow. Please don't do this. 6:15 a.m. I'm coming to the office early. We need to talk before the meeting. 7:03 a.m. I silenced my phone and prepared for the day with deliberate care, selecting a tailored charcoal suit that I'd never worn to work before. The fabric felt crisp against my skin, the subtle designer label a small acknowledgement of my true circumstances. When I stepped into the private elevator that would take me directly to the executive floor, the faint scent of my new perfume, something bolder than I usually wore, filled the small space. The executive assistant outside my father's office greeted me with a warm smile. Miss Westbrook, your father is expecting you. The meeting begins in 20 minutes. The use of my real name sent a small thrill through me. No more hiding, no more diminishing myself. Dad stood when I entered his office, coming around his desk to embrace me. Ready for this? He asked, studying my face with paternal concern. More than ready, I assured him, straightening my shoulders. We walked together to the conference room, where senior management was already assembling. Several executives I'd known my entire life, but who had never seen me at work did double takes as my father introduced me as my daughter, Mia Westbrook, who's been working in accounting for the past 3 years as part of her professional development. The murmurs that spread around the table were quickly silenced as the door opened again. Jake entered, carrying a presentation folder and a laptop, his eyes fixed on his materials until he reached the front of the room. When he finally looked up and saw me sitting beside my father, The blood drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. The folder slipped from his fingers, scattering papers across the polished conference table. "Miss Westbrook," my father addressed me loudly, emphasizing my name. "I believe you're familiar with Mr. Porter's work on the Anderson account." I smiled, meeting Jake's stunned gaze directly. "Very familiar, Father. In fact, I've had a front-row seat to Mr. Porter's methods for quite some time." Jake's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, like a fish out of water. The executives exchanged glances, clearly sensing the tension but unaware of its source. "Perhaps Mr. Porter needs a moment to collect himself," I suggested. "And his papers." Jake dropped to his knees, frantically gathering the scattered documents, his face flushed with humiliation. When he finally stood, his composure was visibly shattered. "Mr. Porter," my father said, his voice deceptively mild, "we're eager to hear your presentation on the Anderson acquisition, unless there's some reason you'd prefer to reschedule." Jake's eyes darted between my father and me, desperation evident in every feature. I can proceed," he managed, his voice cracking slightly. What followed was the most painful presentation I've ever witnessed. Jake stumbled over basic facts, lost his place repeatedly, and answered questions with rambling, contradictory responses. The executive's initial curiosity about the tension in the room gradually transformed into concern about Jake's competence. Throughout the disaster, I remained silent, neither helping nor hindering him. My mere presence seemed to unravel him completely. The power dynamic that had secretly been in his favor for so long had dramatically reversed, and he had no preparation for it. When Jake finally concluded his presentation, my father thanked him with professional courtesy before delivering the coup de grace. "In light of recent organizational assessments," Dad announced to the room, "we'll be implementing several structural changes. The Anderson account will now be supervised directly by the executive team, with Mr. Porter reporting to Thompson in middle management." It wasn't a firing. That would have been too obvious, too easily contested. It was a subtle but unmistakable demotion, removing Jake from the path to executive leadership he'd been so carefully cultivating. As the meeting adjourned, Jake remained rooted in place, staring at me with a mixture of betrayal and pleading. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Miss Westbrook," he finally said, as the room emptied, my father lingering by the door. "Mia, please, can we talk privately?" I gathered my notebook and pen, taking my time before responding. "I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Porter. Our personal and professional relationships have both reached their natural conclusions. Wouldn't you agree?" "I can explain everything," he insisted, his voice low and urgent. "The emails, Eliza, all of it. It's not what you think." I smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. "Actually, it's exactly what I think. You calculated and strategized, and now you can live with the results." I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. "Best of luck with your career, Jake. I hear middle management can be quite comfortable for those without higher ambitions." As I walked away, the sound of his desperate protests faded behind me. My father placed a gentle hand on my shoulder as we exited. "Nicely done," he murmured, though perhaps a bit theatrical for a Monday morning. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. "I learned from the best, Dad." For the first time in years, I walked through the executive floor as myself, nodding to curious executives and feeling the weight of pretense lift from my shoulders. By lunchtime, the story had spread throughout the company, how the quiet, competent Mia Davis from accounting was actually Mia Westbrook, and how Jake Porter had somehow managed to spectacularly destroy both his relationship and his career prospects in a single weekend. I didn't correct any of the rumors. Some stories are better when they tell themselves. 3 days after the disastrous presentation, my phone and email had become a battlefield. Jake had progressed from pleading to anger to bargaining, cycling through emotional states like a man drowning and grasping at anything that might save him. Eliza had joined the campaign as well, her messages oscillating between hostile accusations and tearful apologies. "You've ruined his career," she wrote in one email, followed hours later by, "We never meant to hurt you. Please give him another chance." I filtered their messages into a separate folder, checking it only once daily to ensure there was nothing I needed to address legally or professionally. The emotional bombardment had less impact with each passing day, like waves gradually losing their force against a shoreline. My new apartment was beginning to feel like home. That morning, I'd awakened to sunlight streaming through the wall of windows, the distant sound of traffic 17 floors below creating a gentle urban hum. The sheets felt cool and crisp against my skin as I stretched, savoring the luxury of space that was entirely my own. As I prepared for work, selecting a silk blouse in a bold emerald that I'd never have worn in my previous life, my phone rang with a call from building security. "Miss Westbrook," the security manager began, "there's a Jake Porter in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite persistent." I moved to the window, looking down at the street below. From this height, people looked like chess pieces moving across a board. "How persistent?" "He's been here for nearly an hour, ma'am. He claims it's an emergency regarding Westbrook Industries business." Of course he did. "I'll come down," I decided. "Please don't send him up." "Understood, Miss Westbrook." I finished dressing with deliberate care, taking time with my makeup and selecting subtle but expensive jewelry, small symbols of the self I was reclaiming. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending into a past I'd already outgrown. Jake stood near the security desk, wearing the same suit he'd had on at the presentation. It looked rumpled now, as though he'd slept in it. When he saw me, his face lit with desperate hope. "Mia," he breathed, starting toward me before being halted by a discreet gesture from security. "Thank you for coming down. I've been trying to reach you for days." I maintained a professional distance, acutely aware of the lobby staff watching with barely concealed interest. "What do you want, Jake?" 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." His eyes were bloodshot, his usual confidence replaced by a frenetic energy that made him seem smaller somehow. "Not here. Somewhere private." "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, glancing nervously at the security personnel. "I didn't know who you were when we met," he insisted, his voice low. "The emails Eliza found later, after we were already together. She thought I should use the connection, but I told her no." "Is that why you used my credit card for your party expenses?" I asked quietly. "Because you told her no?" He flinched. "That was a misunderstanding. I thought we were still using the joint account for shared expenses." "We never had a joint account, Jake." "Mia, please." He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath, and something else. The faint scent of whiskey, unusual for a weekday morning. "I love you. Whatever mistakes I made, whatever it looks like, I love you. Eliza was wrong to interfere, and I was wrong to let her." For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine believing him, returning to our relationship with this new power dynamic. I could mold him into the partner I wanted, using my position to ensure he never stepped out of the line again. The thought repulsed me the instant it formed. "No," I said simply. "No?" He looked confused, as if rejection hadn't occurred to him as a possibility. "No, I don't believe you. No, I don't forgive you. No, I won't give you another chance." Each sentence emerged stronger than the last, my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. Jake's expression hardened, a glimpse of the calculation behind his desperation showing through. Think about what you're throwing away. We were good together, Mia. We can be again. Were we? I asked. Was it good when you consistently chose your sister over me? When you lied to your parents about us living together? When you schemed with Eliza to undermine our relationship? His jaw tightened, a flash of anger replacing the pleading in his eyes. That's not fair. You were lying too, about who you really are. I wasn't using you to advance my career, I countered. I wasn't plotting against you with family members. Is this revenge, then? He demanded, his voice rising enough that a security guard took a step closer. You're punishing me professionally because our relationship didn't work out? The accusation hung in the air between us, sharp and desperate. I could see movement outside the glass lobby doors, Eliza pacing on the sidewalk, occasionally peering in. This isn't revenge, Jake, I said finally, my voice softening not with affection but with certainty. This is consequence. You made choices, repeatedly, that showed me exactly where I stood in your priorities. Now I'm making choices about where you stand in mine. He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. I value myself too much to accept your treatment, I continued, the words flowing with a clarity that surprised me. I wish you well in your life and career, but my answer is no. Mia, wait! His hand shot out to grasp my wrist, the sudden movement causing the security guard to step forward immediately. Is there a problem, Miss Westbrook? The guard asked, his tone professional, but with an underlying warning directed at Jake. I gently extracted my wrist from Jake's grip, which had loosened at the guard's approach. No problem. Mr. Porter was just leaving. Jake looked from me to the guard, the reality of his new position in my world finally sinking in. This isn't over, he said, but the words lacked conviction. Yes, I replied with gentle finality. It is. As he walked toward the exit, shoulders slumped in defeat, I saw Eliza rush to meet him. Through the glass doors, I watched their animated conversation, Eliza's gestures becoming increasingly agitated as Jake shook his head. I turned away before they could see me watching, nodding my thanks to the security team as I walked toward the elevator. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Anderson account reorganization complete. Porter reassigned to regional sales, Topeka office. The message was clear. Jake's career at Westbrook Industries would continue, but far from the executive track he'd coveted, far from me, and far from anything resembling influence. As the elevator carried me back to my apartment, I realized I needed a day to myself, to process, to breathe, to fully claim this new chapter of my life. I called my assistant and cleared my schedule, then changed into comfortable clothes and made myself a cup of tea in my new kitchen. Standing by the windows, watching the city sprawl beneath me, I finally allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions I'd been managing so carefully. The hurt of betrayal, the satisfaction of standing my ground, the lingering sadness for what might have been, and beneath it all, a growing sense of peace. The Jake Porter chapter of my life was closed. Whatever came next would be entirely my choice. 6 months flowed by, like water finding its true course. Summer turned to fall, and the city transformed beneath my windows, trees in the park blazing with color before surrendering to winter's approach. At Westbrook Industries, my position had evolved from my former accounting role to Special Projects Director, reporting directly to the executive team. My colleagues, initially wary of the boss's daughter, had gradually come to respect my work ethic and ideas. I neither hid my connection to the company's founder nor leveraged it unfairly, finding a balance that felt authentic. Jake had indeed been transferred to the Topeka office, accepting the position rather than resigning. Occasionally, his name would appear on company-wide emails or reports, a distant reminder of a life I'd left behind. I felt nothing when I saw it. Not anger, not regret, just acknowledging a fact, like noting the weather. My apartment had become truly mine in every sense. Gone were the compromises in decor, the concessions to Jake's preferences that had subtly diminished my own. I'd painted the main wall a bold azure that reminded me of the ocean, hung artwork that spoke to me rather than trying to impress visitors, and arranged the furniture to maximize the view I loved. The scent of fresh flowers, a luxury I now afforded myself weekly, permeated the space, mingling with the aroma of the bread baking in my oven. I'd discovered a passion for baking, finding meditative calm in the precise measurements and tactile process. Today's loaf was rosemary and sea salt, the herbs releasing their fragrance as the bread baked. A gentle knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Opening it, I found my father standing there, a bottle of wine in hand. "Thought you might want company," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Unless you have plans." I welcomed him in, accepting the wine with a smile. "Perfect timing. The bread's almost done." As we settled at my dining table, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk descended, Dad studied me with the perceptive gaze that had helped build his empire. "You look happy," he observed, swirling his wine thoughtfully. "I am," I confirmed, realizing the simple truth of it. It feels like coming home to myself. We talked easily of work and family, of his plans for gradual retirement, and my ideas for the company's future. When dessert was finished and the conversation reached a natural lull, he hesitated before speaking again. "I saw Porter today," he said carefully, watching for my reaction. "He was in town for the regional sales meeting." I felt a brief flutter of something. Not pain, not longing, just acknowledgement. "How did that go?" "He asked about you." Dad's tone remained neutral. "Wanted to know if you were seeing anyone." I laughed softly. "And what did you tell him?" "That your personal life wasn't a topic for discussion with employees." He smiled. "Though I did mention you seemed happier than I'd seen you in years." Later, after Dad had left and I stood alone on my balcony watching the city below, I realized he was right. The happiness I felt wasn't the giddy excitement of a new relationship or achievement. It was deeper and more sustainable, a quiet confidence in my own worth and choices. The next morning, I encountered Jake in the last place I expected, the elevator at corporate headquarters. He'd evidently returned for a second day of meetings, and we found ourselves alone in the confined space, his finger already having pressed the button for the sales department floor. The air felt suddenly thick with unspoken words as the doors closed. Jake looked different, his suit better fitting, his posture straighter, but something in his eyes seemed diminished. "Mia," he acknowledged with a nod, his voice formal. "Jake," I returned evenly. We rode in silence for several floors before he spoke again. "You look well." "Thank you. Topeka agreeing with you?" A flicker of something, resignation perhaps, crossed his face. "It's a change. Eliza hates it." Of course she did. I merely nodded, unsurprised that she had followed him, unwilling to loosen her hold even across state lines. "Your birthday's coming up," he said as the elevator slowed, approaching his floor. "I remember." The doors opened, revealing the bustling sales department beyond. Jake hesitated before stepping out. "I'm sorry," he said simply, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "For everything." Before I could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the activity of the office as the doors closed between us. I continued upward to the executive floor, surprised to find that his apology, while appreciated, didn't feel necessary for my peace. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant, sitting at a table by the window with a book for company. The maitre d' had initially looked puzzled when I'd requested a table for one, but now greeted me with warm familiarity, having grown accustomed to my solo visits. The freedom to choose my own meals, set my own schedule, and prioritize my own preferences was a luxury I'd never fully appreciated before. I savored each bite of my perfectly prepared salmon, the subtle flavors complemented by the crisp white wine I'd selected. When my birthday arrived the following week, I declined multiple offers for celebration dinners and parties, choosing instead a day entirely of my own design. I took a half-day from work, visited my favorite art museum, and treated myself to a massage at an upscale spa. That evening, I lit a single candle on a slice of cake I'd bought from a bakery near my apartment. The flame flickered, casting dancing shadows across my kitchen counter as I closed my eyes to make a wish. I didn't wish for love or success or any of the things I might have wished for a year ago. Instead, I wished for continuation, of this peace I'd found, this strength I'd reclaimed, this life I was building on my own terms. As I blew out the candle, my phone chimed with incoming messages, family, friends, colleagues wishing me well. I replied to each one, grateful for the connections I'd maintained and strengthened since freeing myself from the constraints of a relationship that had demanded constant compromise. Later, standing on my balcony watching the city lights, I realized with quiet certainty that I'd never exchanged a true, equal partnership for solitude. I'd exchanged a diminishing relationship for a life of fullness and authenticity. A cool breeze carried the scent of approaching rain as I turned to go inside, closing the balcony door behind me. My reflection in the glass caught my eye. Shoulders straight, expression serene, eyes clear and certain, I smiled at myself. This woman I was still getting to know after years of compromise. She looked back at me with quiet confidence, no longer waiting for external validation to determine her worth. The apartment wrapped around me like an embrace as I moved through the rooms, turning off lights and preparing for sleep. In the peaceful darkness, my phone screen lit up with a final birthday message. From my father. Proud of you, it read simply. Not for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become. I set the phone aside, settling into bed with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, decisions to make and boundaries to maintain. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. At home in my life, at peace with my choices, and complete in myself.